most of it's probably mental. You don't like dark places that are wet and you're claustrophobic. You have a bunch of phobias and stuff. It's not going to be the place for you.
Frank went up there to try to see if he could hopefully get into one of these tunnels, but really not looking like it. Says it's way too angular. Oh. We were trying to get over to right about there. Doesn't look like it's a no-go. That's where we were down in.
My plan here was to climb up here, and it looked like there was a ledge from the bottom where I could get across, but as you can see, it's there is no ledge, it's just really steep.
Where the hell is he now? Oh, there he is. Oh, he's got a big one now. Style grease coming yet?
Focus. Big machine, eh?
Yeah.
But look down in here, I think.
I'm betting the stairs are scary.
Yeah, they're smaller. Pretty tough. Only about 400 feet and we'll come straight down. About half of it, no ladders at all, just straight down. Just step right through to the floor. Right on the floor here. There's been so many junctions and stuff that we've been at. Don't really have any idea which way's out now. One of the reasons I moved to Grand Forks is because I wanted to do more flying with my plane. So they're flying the plane and looking at the scenery. I flew over Phoenix and I didn't know what it was. Just a huge open pit and a big lake there. You know, I was just amazed. I flew over the pit and it's just like Swiss cheese up there. You know, there's a big open pit and you just see all these big holes going way down the ground. I know if you go to the tourist information or something and you start asking about it, they just say, well, no, it's all gone, there's nothing there. And you know it was a mine. I heard the stories about the mine and we just had to go in there and check it out.
We have our traffic in Phoenix area, Hotel Juliet Echo, just over Phoenix Mine, inbound for Grand Forks, conflicting traffic, Hotel Juliet Echo.
Well, you know, I remember years ago when I was a kid, you know, we used to ride our Harleys up to Sandon and we went into a mine one day. I spent a whole day in the Noble 5 and I thought, well, that was so much fun. We should do it again. Right away, I drove my pickup up there and hiked up to the mine and started exploring that mine. Saw these great big holes here and I thought, oh man, it was so much fun going to that mine years ago when I was younger. We should do it again. You know, a lot of people know about Phoenix in this area. The funny thing is nobody thinks there's nothing there. When you start asking people, they say, oh yeah, well, there was a town there. Nobody really knows that there's miles and miles of tunnels and stuff there. They just assume everything's all wiped out. And when you start telling them, he says, oh no, you can go up there and you know, all the mines are still there and there's miles and miles and levels of track and there's trains in there and there's ice in there. Wow, you know, nobody knew. They thought, well, there's nothing to see up there, it's all gone. The Granby Company operated the mines up at Phoenix starting around 1900. They found out about this huge deposit of copper up at Phoenix. The big advantage of copper is it's very good at conducting electricity. So when suddenly they started getting electricity in all the towns in America and everywhere, and all of a sudden they had to find copper for the wiring. So around 1900, the railway come in. They built the largest smelter at the time that was ever in the British Commonwealth. 2 railways ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They built a town close to where the mines were, and it was called Phoenix. 1,500 people that lived there, 20 saloons, there was 4 banks, and there's a skating rink, all the modern amenities of the town. And it was just in the middle of bush, in the middle of nowhere, and the only reason the town was there was to house the miners and to exploit that huge copper deposit. The railways never stopped hauling ore for 20 years, you know, right from 1900 till when it shut down in 1920. They just hauled a mountain of ore out of there. In 2014, I started a YouTube channel called Exploring Abandoned Mines. In a very short period of time, I had tens of thousands of subscribers tuning in to watch my weekly show. People from all over the world were really excited to see these old mines abandoned 100 years ago or more that had never been videotaped before. While there were a few other YouTube channels, there was nobody around that was willing to go into these deep places with the ropes and do a good job of really explaining how the mines operated and about the history of these mines. Everyone likes to go exploring. You know, it's pretty exciting to go for a drive in the countryside and you always wonder what's around that next road. Imagine being in a mine that nobody's been in 100 years. There was a whole bunch of buildings here at one time. It's hard to imagine what it looked like 100 years ago. You see these old pictures and there's just massive buildings and we're standing on a whole bunch of tunnels. It's all tunnels underneath this. First of all, you should never go in a mine. So if you decide not to take my advice and go into a mine anyhow, you need to be very conservative, be mindful of the deteriorating quality, and you need to be able to assess what's in the mine.
This ore pass is particularly hazardous. As you look up, you see there's a huge boulder that's just hanging in there with a whole bunch of small stuff behind that. So obviously if you did anything to upset that, it would land on you. And that'd be the last thing you'd remember. Looks pretty sketchy, eh? Some of this is really rotten and you walk too far out on it, you could end up falling through that. Well, it's like that game that you played when you were kids with the marbles and the straws. Kerplunk, pull the wrong straw out and all the marbles come on you, crashing down on your head. It's easy right now while it's still holding, but it won't hold forever. If you're unlucky, it'll seal this tunnel right off. There's a kind of a cool rule in survival. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and I think 3 months without hope. Every time you come into a mine and you get into a branch like this, you always take the right hand. So every time you decide which way to go, so you go along here, you take the right. Then you go to the very end here, it ends, it doesn't go any further. So then you come back out again and you take the right one again. This would be like your finger, you know, you go to the end and then you'd end up going to each branch. So I wasn't paying attention. I think we got to go the other way, but I spent lots of time in this mine. I usually just go here by myself all the time. Never bothered me. But if something happens down here, if you're by yourself, you probably die of exposure before they find you. You know, basically, if you're stuck in here on your own, you have to be prepared to rescue yourself. There's nobody gonna come in here and save you in time. You're gonna die of hypothermia, you know, within 24 hours of being stuck here, I'm sure. And I doubt if anyone will be able to find you that quick. Well, there's dangers in abandoned mines, but I wouldn't say that they're really dangerous. It's like saying dogs are dangerous. You know, there's dangerous dogs, so you have to be able to assess the risks and take precautions. Basically, don't go beyond your abilities. You know, what may be safe for me may not be safe for somebody else.
I think of abandoned mines as almost like a time capsule. Some mines were operated and they've shut down very suddenly. You just go along and all the shovels are just leaned against the wall. So you're going in there and you know no one's been in there. So it's like you're going back in history. It's like a time machine sometimes.
And this is where the lever would be for the chute. So the train's coming along here. You just stand up here. Then you can open this and fill the ore cars. A bit more of a pain with a pack, but. There was a cool little thing here called a bird's nest. There it is right there. Another thing you see in mines a lot is bats. Those people back then were just such craftsmen though. They knew how to work steel and metals and different things like that. Stuff is coming out of the ice that we find that was previously frozen. So it's kind of almost interesting coming in here just about every year and seeing what new stuff has popped out of the ice. Pretty exciting when we found this section because with the ice was there, we weren't able to get down here before. So we know nobody's been down here for a long time since we found it. This mine is so massive, I don't know how anyone would ever find you. I'm sure they'd be just looking for your remains if something happened to you underground and you didn't make it back out. Really, the Granby company started off in Phoenix around 1900, but as the copper was starting to get depleted, they had to go further and further down. It was getting more expensive. They heard about this other bigger deposit in Anyox, and they quickly bought that, and they started moving their operations to Anyox because there was just more copper there, it was richer, and it was cheaper. So over time, they started gradually moving their operations over there, and one day they just closed Phoenix completely, and they moved everything there. Anyox, it's been kind of it's almost like a legend, you know. It's such a big mine. It was Canada's largest ghost town. There's 3,000 people. There's no roads, nothing. You had to get up there by ship. And they built the biggest smelter in the British Commonwealth. The town was twice the size, and they got twice as much copper out of there. And Anyox, I mean, they produced 8,500 tons of ore a day, which is like 300 semi-loads of ore every day that went to that smelter. State-of-the-art technology. Just a huge operation, and they operated that mine right till 1935, and it's so far off the beaten path, you know, there hasn't been a bunch of people up there, so you're kind of wondering, how could we go up there and explore that and see what's still left in there? Could we get underground? And we never thought we could. So the only way to get into Anyox, there's no roads there, this is completely cut off. This is observation inlet here. So we come in here by boat. Our biggest problem is we've got a lot of weight on this boat, so because there's 3 of us, so we're here for a week, so that's a lot of beer. So what we're trying to do is drink as much beer as we can on the trip here to kind of lighten it up. It's not really helping much because we haven't had to get pissed yet. So this is where the big slag pile is there, and the smelter was there. It's all overgrown now, and this is where all the town site was in Anyox. It's all gone now, and the big fire, it all burned. You know, today you look back there and you look at what was there, and it's really hard to believe it. But you can see all this is kind of just shrinking back into the forest, and Mother Nature is just taking it back. The water hits this wheel at tremendous pressure and turns these just massive generators over to produce that electricity. The train went all the way up to the mine. And there's that big, huge concrete ore bin you see up there, and the rock crushers are underneath there. There was a wrench there that, there's big nuts there, they're 8 inches, we measured the 8-inch nuts right there. And the wrench I could barely lift. I've never seen a wrench that big in my whole life. Probably the most awesome thing about Anyox, just you look at the massive scale of everything there, of how big the trains were and how much ore that went out there and how big the machines are, how big the smelter was, and you know, everything's like that. Well, I always say that Anyox is a holy grail of mines. I mean, it's just the biggest, the largest, the most awesome mine in a remote location, and it's just a real privilege to actually go up there and see it, especially the underground part. I mean, it was totally blasted shut and flooded, and nobody's been in there since 1935. We took ropes and went down 400 feet down to the very main level. We know we're the first people in there because there's 5 feet of water in there, and we had to drain the water to get into the mine. But all you do is go along with a pickaxe, and these dams are just naturally formed. You just go along there and pick at them a little bit, and the water would come pouring out of there. You're just like a little kid there playing in the mud. You know, you start picking, and all of a sudden the water just starts screaming out of there. there's dynamite in there, look.
You know, the buildings were built out of wood and concrete, and they've crumbled and they've burnt, and there's not much left there. But the mines are as they were. The mines are built out of solid rock. You go back in there, and you can see these just massive holes they blasted through there, and the hoist and the trains, and you can really see how the mines are operated. There's still dynamite and dynamite boxes and machines and stuff underground.
So we're hoping this isn't too deep now, because when we went up to the end of the mine, we had to let quite a bit of water down. So we're kind of worried we might be swimming at the end here, but.
The story is almost like the towns of Phoenix and Anyox, and they're interlinked. And there was a big boom that came, and it was built up from absolutely nothing. And then all of a sudden it just went bankrupt, and everyone left, and it went back to nothing. And you know, today you look back there and you look at what was there, and it's really hard to believe it. But you can see all this is kind of just shrinking back into the forest, and Mother Nature is just taking it back. On the one hand, you know, it's really sad to see this huge town, this beautiful town, completely laying in ruins. On the other hand, it's kind of nice to see nature going back, so there's almost kind of two ways of looking at it. One of the reasons I want to try to get in and document as many of these mines as possible, so future generations can look at a video and say, oh, this is what the Velvet Mine looked like, or this is what Phoenix looked like, and now we can't get into there, so we like to try to document these kind of things while we still can. You gotta be pretty careful with explosives. This one, this is a stick of dynamite, and it's from 1918. It's actually amazing up in Phoenix and Granby, the technology in the 20 years between 1900 and 1920 basically went from horse and buggy to the modern era in 20 years, you know, with electric trains, and really from just really crude horsepower and mules and stuff to, you know, state-of-the-art modern mine. For me, it's just a really comfortable place to go there, even though you're not comfortable while you're there. I mean, it's cold and it's wet and you're pushing yourself hard physically and mentally, but my idea of a vacation is not sitting on a beach drinking a beer for 2 weeks and doing nothing. There you go. Wow, eh? That was a long ways down, huh?